Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about how laws and regulations affect your monthly rental. So one of the first things you look at is you look at it from both ends. You look at it from a long-term rental and a short-term rental in terms of regulations, as monthly rentals are in between. So in terms of long-term rentals, you want to look at it from a perspective of, is this a tenant or a landlord-friendly state? As some states will look at short-term rentals, anything that isn't a short-term rental is a long-term rental. So you want to make sure that your state, if it doesn't have specific monthly rental or midterm rental regulations, that you're able to talk on both sides of it. So from a long-term rental perspective, you need to see if it is a tenant or a landlord-friendly state. On the other side of it is you look at it from a short-term rental regulation side. So for instance, here in Texas, a short-term rental is considered anything less than 30 days. So if you have 30 days or longer, it would then be excluded from occupancy taxes and short-term rental regulations. So for example, in California, any guest that stays past 30 days, so 30 consecutive days at your property, they would then be considered a tenant and have tenant rights. Alternatively, in New York, a guest that stays past 30 days still does not have tenant rights if it is evident that they have a residence in another location and that they didn't intend to stay long-term there. Let's go over a few terminology so that we're all on the same page. A tenant is someone who is authorized by a lease to occupy a dwelling and is obligated to pay rent for that lease. A squatter is someone who occupies a property or a piece of land and does not have any legal claim to it. A holdover tenant is someone who occupies a property after the expiration of their lease. Adverse possession is commonly known as squatter's rights. This is whenever a person who does not have legal claim to the property stays continuously at the property and is able to then claim legally that they own that property without the permission of the original legal owner. So when most people talk about squatters' rights and monthly rentals, it's actually not the legal term for it. As in most states, the legalities for it, the squatter would have to stay for a prolonged amount of time. And again, that would mean that they were staying at the property without even your permission. For example, in Texas, for a person to stay in your property without your knowledge and then be able to claim adverse possession, it would take 10 years for them to stay there before they can claim that. Most often for monthly rentals, when you have someone who is overstaying, you're typically not dealing with squatters' rights, but more of a holdover tenant or someone who is criminally trespassing. Oftentimes, hotels have to deal with someone that does not want to leave their room, and that then would become an issue of someone criminally trespassing. So for all guests who are staying on platforms on a monthly rental, including home ads, those guests are given a license to use the property rather than a lease to use the property. So if you go offline, you have to be a bit more careful about how you handle this transaction to make sure that you don't fall into the tenant and landlord relationship. So what this means is that a license doesn't allow a guest to have interest in the building legally, but rather it allows them and gives them permission to just use the property. Please know this is not legal advice and that this is only from our own experience. If you have or are thinking of operating a monthly rental, please reach out to a local real estate attorney, as they'll know not only the laws locally, but also on a state basis. If you enjoyed this video, you can also check out our other video that talks about the top 5 things you can do to keep squatters out. We also know that through this video is actually not squatters, but most people understand holdover tenants in that term. You can also check out in the link below of our blog that goes into the legalities and regulations of monthly rentals. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you next time.